Good evening and welcome. Let's take a look at our top story. Much of the United States is gripped by an unprecedented winter storm. The frigid Arctic air has plunged temperatures, forcing hundreds of flight cancellations, making driving hazardous and leaving millions without power. The dangerous winter storm has broken records across the country, especially in typical states like Texas and Oklahoma, where temperature varies from arid to humid. Now, this has led to a trail of destruction across states unaccustomed to such harsh weather. As per the latest reports, at least 11 deaths have been linked to the winter storm. Some 4 million homes and businesses in Texas are left without power, and the state's electric system is struggling to meet the demands. The infrastructural damage caused by the cold snap could rival the cost of a hurricane. The Southwest Power Pool, which works across 14 states, has called for rolling outages because the energy supply has been exhausted. Now, some utilities started blackouts, while others urged customers to reduce power usage. Massive power outages across Houston includes a facility storing 8,000 doses of the Moderna vaccine. Health officials are scrambling to find takers, while authorities pleaded for people to stay at home. As nightfall threatens to plummet the temperatures into single digits, officials have warned that homes without power would not have heat until at least Tuesday. Now, as frustration mounts over state's electric grid, President Biden has declared an emergency in Texas with a call to add federal aid to state and local response efforts. Now, let me say this again. 4 million people across Texas are without power for at least 24 hours. Social media was ablaze with widespread reports that downtown areas, like in Austin, were lit up like a shiny island in a sea of black, while neighboring suburbs remained dark in the frigid cold. The Arctic air has engulfed the Midwest. Severe thunderstorms are extending into Kentucky, Tennessee, and the Carolinas. As one winter storm leaves the East Coast, another will begin taking shape across the nation's southern tier, aiming for some of the same hard-hit areas through the end of this week. A tornado associated with the winter storm in North Carolina overnight has killed at least 3 and injured 10 others. Now, the wind chill watches and warnings stretch from the Dakotas to the Gulf Coast as the coldest morning of this Arctic outbreak hits. Apart from the climate change, the Polar Vortex Arctic blast is also responsible for the frigid weather across America. The Polar Vortex is a gigantic circular upper air weather pattern in the Arctic. It envelops the North Pole, and the pattern generally bottles up the coldest air near the North Pole, but at times the vortex breaks off or moves south, bringing unusually cold weather down to the US, Europe, and Asia. Now, this year, a chunk of the polar vortex has slid down towards the US. According to AccuWeather, the Arctic blast from Canada is bringing big chill to much of the Midwest and into the eastern parts of the US. For more on this, we are being joined by our correspondent Susan Tehrani from New York. It's great to have you with us, Susan. Can you take us through this unprecedented inclement weather and the latest projections update?
Unprecedented and historic indeed. You know, these are states that are not used to such low temperatures. The central part of the United States, places like Texas and Louisiana, it's so historic that weather forecasters are telling us the last time these regions in this part of the United States faced such cold weathers, and not even as much as 2021, was back in the 1800s. So unprecedented indeed. And you mentioned that the federal government has stepped in to help Texas. A lot of other states will be reaching out to the Biden administration. We know that for sure, for help and federal assistance. But what states are doing themselves is something that they call rolling blackouts, which again is very unusual to do in that part of the United States that usually enjoys warmer weathers, is to have power outages every few hours so that they won't have a complete blackout. As you know, one of the dire situations was the people who were injured and killed due to this storm, and it was not only because their houses, some were destroyed, but it was also because they were trying to keep themselves warm by unsafe means. For example, a mother and daughter left their car running in the garage all through the night, and due to carbon monoxide overdose, they were sent to the hospital. Another individual was trying to keep warm with a charcoal grill. So there are a lot of advisories. Half of the United States right now is under a winter weather advisory, and state officials are hoping that they can manage this backlog, notably regarding the COVID vaccine appointments and also distribution of the COVID vaccine. Once this storm sort of goes out of the region, there'll be a lot of backlogs about how they'll be distributing that. You know, the big chain store Walmart has already closed 38 stores, and for the first time in history, the Houston Chronicle, a newspaper, will not be printing his newspaper because of lack of electricity. The storm is expected to come our way in the northeast by Thursday. We're already under a winter advisory during that time. And just one more thing that I was going to actually mention. As the central part of the United States is suffering from this thunderstorm and this huge storm, there is also Storm Viola, which is overwhelming the western Pacific region of the United States, states like Oregon. And there was a recent explosion at a power grid in Portland, Oregon, due to the overwhelming use of electricity in that part of the United States as well. So it's very all-encompassing at this point.
Right. And Susan, we know some states, typically like Texas as an example, they usually used to weather that's humid to arid. This kind of weather has led to a trail of destruction. How is the government geared up to deal with this now?
A lot of issues related to thunderstorms, storms, and massive hurricanes are often dealt with the state, by the state. And states usually get annual funding, fiscal funding, to deal with these issues. This seems to be an unprecedented amount of damage. And as you know, winter hasn't been kind to the United States. Even in recent weeks, we've had other destructions and damages as well. So the Biden administration hopes to take care of state by state, for example, these 14, 15 states that have been affected, and see how that moves forward. But definitely this isn't a long-term plan, considering the fact that America's infrastructures have been ailing for centuries. And many people hope that perhaps the issue of infrastructure will be a uniting point between the Democrats and Republicans, and Congress can pass a substantial bill and really address America's infrastructure problems, roads, bridges, and hopefully make American lives a lot better. And another issue, for example, that the Biden administration has been really pressing for is the issue of climate change and meeting deadlines for pollution. If a good infrastructure plan annually is placed, then America would actually cut back on some 68 million tons of carbon monoxide due to traffic and trucks, just by creating safe roads and bridges and power grids like this one. So it's definitely in the conversation. The concern is because a COVID bill is being passed right now and so much money is expected to be sent. Once again, where will the conversation of reviving America's infrastructures lead to?
Susan, it's always great to speak to you, and thank you for bringing us the details on that unprecedented weather coming out of the US. WION, now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.